Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Raquel Batista, and I am the host of Critica.NYC. Critica.NYC focuses on the life, work, and politics of the Latinx community and in New York City and beyond. And today we are going to be talking about mental health and self care. A few weeks ago, I asked on my Facebook page, I asked my friends to let me know what topic would they like to cover for this episode of Critica NYC. This is our last live for 2020 until January of 2021. And many people responded back saying that they were interested in hearing about mental health and self care. And as many of you in the audience are experiencing, there's a lot, going on, in the world with everything from the coronavirus pandemic to recently, New York decided to close indoor dining in our restaurants. Many families continue to experience whether it's their school closing down because of coronavirus infections to experiencing even the very sad reality of death in their families. So many people, as we're going into the holiday season now, this week we celebrate Christmas, next week is New Year's. And, a lot of people have on their mind what is 2021 have in store for us and how are we going to continue making it through, especially during this winter. We do have, some good news. Some people are happy that now the vaccine has been rolling out throughout the United States. So that brings, for some people, consider could be very promising in terms of helping to manage everything that has to happen with this pandemic. Others are still skeptical and waiting to see what is going to happen and if this is really going to bring results for us and for our ability to quote unquote go back to normal. Other in other things in the news is recently the United States Congress has voted on a coronavirus relief bill. And as we've been reading about this relief bill, it fell short. It fell short for our communities where they're planning to only give $600 per person in a family for this relief when we have been going through this virus for over 10 months now. And we've seen record numbers of people on unemployment, of food insecurity, and so many other things that worry us on a day-to-day basis. So today we have two wonderful guests that are going to be joining us. And we're going to be talking about mental health. How do we keep ourselves together through all of this? How do we take care of ourselves at home? How do we take care of our loved ones? How do we address issues from anxiety to depression? And, how do we make sure that, we are able to keep going? So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dayanara Marte. She is she has been involved on issues from domestic violence, sexual assault. She's a human rights activist. She obtained her doctorate in social work from the University of Southern California and also has her master's in public health from Columbia University. And we are very excited to have her. She's a resident of Washington Heights, Dominicana, here to talk about the issues that are impacting our community. Hola, doctora, how are you?
Hi, Raquel. First of all, this is such an honor. Thank you so much. We know each other for so many years. And so it's nice to circle back unfortunately, under these circumstances, but I'm glad to share that you asked me to share this stage with you today.
Yes, so we titled the show to say, "Do we see clearly now?" And that's kind of looking at 2020, right? We're having 2020 vision now, looking back at this year, right? And you have been, also dealing with all of these issues around the virus. Please share with us. I mean, first, I would like for the audience to hear a little bit more about you, about your trajectory, your career, why you've decided to do the work that you do. And then, we can talk a little bit more about what people can do to take care of themselves through this time.
Sure. Gracias a todo el mundo. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here again. Wow. So I call myself, the traveling healer. I started my career in the South Bronx, which is where I met Raquel, on 140th Street in Manhattan. I worked for an organization called Psychotherapist, which translates into the House of Women's Power. And some Latina sisters got together who were working in social justice, social service organizations, but were experiencing racism and sexism. And we're kind of like, this organization doesn't really reflect the work that it's doing out in the world. And so they got together to think about what would it look like to formulate an organization where women, right, of color specifically, can be their most powerful selves without the madness and without having to deal with the power over, the racism, the sexism that often comes with us being first responders, on the front lines of social justice, and then having to deal with that internally, with your, with management or board, or, within your organizations. And so they created this beautiful organization called Casa Tabex, which is how I came into the work of social justice. And we basically supported young and adult women of healing from oppression and historical trauma and intergenerational violence, right? And the way that manifests in our lives, mind, body, and spirit. And we worked with young women because obviously the earlier that we work with young women, the less internalization they have of, this world, right? And so that they don't take up drugs and self-mutilation and have low self-esteem, we introduce them to things that get lost on our migration or our immigration. And so we introduce them to cultural and spiritual tools that are innate to who we are as not just Latinas, but people of color in this country. And that, I'm glad that you said, 2020 vision, right? Like, do we see clearly now? And I think that what COVID has done is had us, whether we like it or not, have to go back to our spirituality, have to go back to our homes, have to go back to ourselves. We've had to reclaim some things that maybe, we didn't even know we had to do, right? And medicines, right? That medicina casera, that we had to, start thinking again, like, what did my grandma do? And who do we pray to again? And how am I going to get through this? So that's the work that I did in the South Bronx for many years, and supported people in doing harm reduction, HIV and AIDS, getting off of medication, doing self-healing retreats, dealing with mental health in the spectrum of that. And eventually now working with women of color just like us, who are first responders, essential workers, working on the front lines, working in organizations and institutions, that we have our own stories and haven't had the time yet to do our own healing, so we can continue to show up powerfully, right?
Thank you for that, Dr. Marte. And I also want to, emphasize that we will be using our letters here. So we will refer to you as doctora, doctor.
Yes,
we need to send a message, right? That, it takes a lot to get to that point to earn your doctorate in your field, and to earn your degree to, whether you're an attorney or a social worker. And so we will be using those terms throughout the
Yes, and I think we need to understand that we're still the 1% in that area, right? We're still very much the minority in getting our degrees in so many areas, even though more and more of us are stepping into that place. But yes, to honoring our degrees today.
Yes. So, I do want to, share personally, like, this whole time has been very rough. It's been rough for me, for my daughter, for my family. I have in my lifetime been actively in therapy.
Mhm.
And I decided to return and start seeing my therapist again, because I was definitely, feeling depressed, feeling down. It's been really tough, dealing with all of these things, knowing so many people who have passed away because of this disease. All the life changing decisions, that I have had to make in terms of my business, where I live, what I'm doing. And then, having to also deal with the people around me and their feelings and their emotions. And so, it definitely has been a roller coaster. And also, I have decided to do like different things, like incorporate more meditation on a day-to-day basis. I've been doing these meditations that have been led by the Brujas of Brooklyn, who I had on my show on the first episode of Critica.NYC. And I know that out there, in the social media world, there's a lot of people doing a lot of really interesting things to help, sustain and feed people throughout this. And so I would love to hear a little bit about, the things that you have done. I know that you have also offered different spaces for people to be able to come in and get that kind of emotional support that they're looking for through all of this.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, right? I think one of the things that I tell people is, we've never done this before. So we need to bring a lot of compassion, a lot of grace to ourselves because we've never done COVID and we've definitely never done quarantine or social isolation. And I know a lot of people have been like, I've been in social isolation before this, but this is a very different type of game. And I also had to pivot. I think I still don't know what day it is. Half of the time I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So my body has also been rewired. And I probably would not have made it through to today if I didn't have community and therapy and my own coach and spiritual people around me who I get to call in crisis at any given moment of the day, right? To be like, am I going crazy? Well, because check me, check me, because I'm not sure what's happening. And we haven't just had to deal with COVID, right? Our communities are dealing with police brutality. We had George Floyd, we have Breonna Taylor, we have so many people we haven't even heard of yet. There's been uprisings. People have been managing this going back to default when they thought they had finally broken through something or broken some addiction and some scarcity, and all of a sudden going right back because how else? Right? Losing jobs, losing community, having to do funerals online, pivoting. I mean, so much. And so what I've been able to offer, I do executive coaching for executive directors who have had to learn how to manage staff during this time, who have had to become therapists and coaches also, not just supervision, right? But have had to deal with staff kind of dealing with all of this and dealing with people on staff who have COVID, dealing with people who are going through mental issues, dealing with grief, right? So just organizations and folks are dealing with so much. And so I offer crisis. So I'm also on call 24 hours for folks in organizations and who are on the front lines and essential workers. And I use that really like broad, right? Like teachers and community folk and whoever it is, right? I think for me, we're all essential workers. So So yeah, that's how I've been able to kind of come in and offer also staff development and organizational healing support. So bringing healing justice to different movements as they manipulate, not just pivoting, but then also being on the front lines and rallying and taking care of communities while they take care of themselves. And so just a lot going on for us right now.
Yeah, no, I feel like, there's that, right? People who are still working, right? And thank God that they are still have their jobs and are able to earn a paycheck and, hopefully be able to keep a roof over their heads and, food on the table, right? And also while they're out there, they're also, helping to take care of other people in the community and people who are also having issues. What is your like, the top three things that you advise to people who are in leadership or people who are on the front lines in terms of, how to manage their emotions through this?
Well, I think the number one thing is compassion and grace. We've never done this before. You too, you don't know who you are during this time. So we need to stop evaluating ourselves and each other from the past because it doesn't exist. It's not coming back, right? So stop doing programming and evaluations and planning strategically the same way. It's not going to work, right? No, don't bring blame and shame to this. People are doing their best every single day. It's okay to break down. It's okay to stop. It's okay to take off. Like,
Take time off.
take time, like, let it go. What are you doing, and unfortunately, right, we're going up against the grain. There's a lot of funders who have shifted also, but a lot of funders who have not, right? And so people are like, yeah, right, self-care, and I want to do that, but I have a grant due, right? This funder still needs my report, and it's like, what are we doing, right? It's kind of the conversation about like, why are children in school again? It's kind of the same thing, like, why are we pushing this, right?
Yeah.
So
Can you give
yeah.
me an example? Can you give me an example of what, compassion and grace looks like?
Wow, compassion and grace takes something, but it's kind of like a when people say to me, like, I used to have a lot of energy, right? By this time, I had done this, and this. And I'm like, that's great, right? Like pre-COVID, I'm sure that was amazing. Post-COVID, that is not what you're going to do. You have slept, you are tired, you are exhausted, you don't know why, you are emotional. Your brain doesn't sit still, your family is home, your children are home. Like that's you just can't be that person anymore. So why don't we take a deep breath, and remember that you are doing your best. And no, it doesn't look like what your best looked like in 20, whatever, prior to February of 2020, right? And so, take a deep breath, right? Bring some compassion to yourself and, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for just doing one thing today. Forgive yourself for sleeping. Forgive yourself for losing it for a second. It's okay, right? And bring that same level of forgiveness to your child who is, in camera all day long, or your partner, or the fact that, all of y'all are in one house. Like, let's breathe. What is this opportunity gifting us also has been a big thing, right? What is the opportunity that is present in the midst of this chaos for your family, for healing, for stopping for a second and maybe turning to some other things that you wanted to give more care and commitment to that you couldn't do before, right?
Yeah. And the holidays, always make things just a little bit more pronounced, right? Because we're so used to, we're going to have all the family over. We're going to have that big party. We're going to have our coquito and pastel en hoja, which we're still having, but maybe not with the whole family, right? And so that also really takes an emotional toll, how to navigate having the conversations with your family to let them know like where your boundaries are. I think that has also been really hard, because for a lot of us, it's really hard to say no to our family. No, you can't come over. No, we can't do this, because we're trying to protect each other. How do you see that, playing out, amongst your clientele?
That has been the big one, right? Because that's where I think the biggest part of mental health comes in, right? Because it's not just about being alone, but it brings up a lot of loneliness. And if you're someone who has had physical family around but has still feel abandoned or neglected by them, or already was outcasted, right? Like all of those things, and on top of that is really happening now, right? Then you're sitting at home with a double whammy, you know. And so this has been bringing up a lot of grief for people, um, and not just grief because they've actually physically lost someone, but like just like physical touch grief, right? Like we have not just lost people, but we have lost physical touch. We have lost laughter and celebration and joy. We have lost, giving each other energy, right? Some of us like live off of someone else's energy, right? And the laughter and the conflict of it. And that has been really, really tough. And so it has been about, creating kind of small community around you, because I think this is the time that we've had to see who's here. Who's here? Who do I know? Who are my neighbors? Who did I let go of? Who do I need to bring back? Who do I need to tap into? So it's really creating these really small kind of concentric circles of people that you love and trust, that, have been socially isolating, that, are going to take tests just to kind of come over and see you, right? So it's about learning how to navigate these times, not necessarily continue to socially isolate, but like, what do you put in place, right? So that you're not doing this, you're not going up the grain of wanting to do this the way that you did it before.
Yeah. So we have a question from one of our viewers. She asked, Dr. Marte, many married couples are divorcing. How can they cope?
Holy moly, divorce, child. I'm gonna say this, take this with a grain of salt, and it might hit a little hard, but I think COVID has put a lot of strain on a lot of relationships, and yes, a lot of people are divorcing. And divorce doesn't happen from one day to the next because there's you know what is this? What is this? An epidemic, right? Mm-hmm. So divorce had been coming. It had been coming, and now it's here, right? Divorce is something that takes sometimes years. It's not a moment thing because there's a crisis in the world, right? I think the crisis exasperates it, but it is exasperating something that has already been brewing, right? In that couple, in that family, in that relationship, in that partnership that had already been brewing. And it's gonna add to the social isolation. But I think I didn't get divorced because of COVID, but I got divorced right before COVID. And I always say to myself, thank God, not because I didn't love the person or because I didn't go through my grief, but because I wasn't in the same home as that person. So what was I freed from? What was the liberation that I got, that I didn't have to, sit at home with someone? And so many of us, just the way that people are getting divorced, so many of us have had to sit with partners and family and folks that we don't get along with. Some of us, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, emotional, verbal, spiritual abuse has been on the rise. So sometimes I know that I have to take a step back and go through the grief, right? Go through the tears, go through the isolation of it all, go through the what coulda, shoulda, and also say gracias a Dios that I didn't have to socially isolate with someone potentially, right, that there was already a disconnect with.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, how you say like a lot of these things, a lot of these issues that come up were things that were happening pre-COVID, and they now get, pronounced. Now you like really see the issues. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, we have a lot of people who suffer from anxiety, right? Or they already suffer from depression. Mm-hmm. And now, they're going through this, right? And so what would you, tell a person, for example, who has never experienced therapy, someone who's never gone to get help, never participated in any sort of like group work or anything like that, right? And they're sitting at home right now saying, wow, what should I do? What can I do, given their circumstances?
I think, therapy, unfortunately, especially for people of color communities, is something that's still very taboo. People think, if I go to therapy, it's because I'm crazy, something's wrong with me. The community is going to know if they see me coming out in such and such's office or whatever. And so, one, we need to continue to start, break that, right? Because therapy is not about being crazy. Therapy is just about, having someone see us, right? Because part of most of our depression and anxiety and mental health comes from deep, deep trauma, but a lot of it also comes from not feeling seen, not feeling like we're enough, not feeling heard, not feeling like we have a safe space to talk to someone who's not going to judge us, who's not going to bring opinions, who, is not going to tell us what to do, right? My whole thing is, we are experts of our lives and we just need a safe space to get out of the way, right? To kind of sift through some things. And so, look at starting really small. So for those of us that haven't gone to therapy, are not thinking about that for all the reasons, it's okay, first of all. And second of all, you probably are getting some support, because if you're going through depression and anxiety in some way, shape, or form, and you are still here with us, then that means that you're doing something that works. And it's about finding a person, not 10 people, but one person that you love and trust, that is already in your life, that is already helping you be here today with us. So, and be more intentional, bring some more intentionality to those conversations. If you don't want to go seek help outside of yourself, bring some more intentionality to that, because what's going to get us through these times is community, is sisterhood, is friendship, because that's what we have closest to us right now.
Yeah, and I think that, a lot of those things may, hopefully reignite friendships and relationships. I think that what happens, especially in a city like New York, you get so busy and so caught up in your day to day that you're just like, getting ready, get the kids to school, pick them up, get home, make dinner, get people ready for bed, go to bed. And, this whole experience has really gotten us to slow down, right? And to, start paying attention to ourselves and to each other in a very different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, for example, I just want to highlight, yesterday was the Great Conjunction, and I hope people got to go outside and look up at the sky and see Jupiter and Saturn. You could actually see it with a telescope or with binoculars. And some people say that it's the Star of Bethlehem, that is the Christmas star, and whatever your beliefs are, but, being able to slow down and even just connect with the earth, right? Connect with what's happening around us. And knowing, right, that there's things that are bigger than us that are happening, right? And also having that spiritual connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you've done, a lot of work around that too, because I think, right, it goes hand in hand with what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm glad you said that. And, when we talk about therapy, it's hard to bring in the spirituality, but I'm actually not a trained therapist, right? I am a healer and a coach. And I make that distinction because, part of what I bring to someone who comes to me for any type of support is, tap into your spirituality, tap into your ancestors. Where's your altar? Right? And our altars look really different. And some of us don't want to call them altars. Well, where's your sacred space in your home where you get to tap into something so much bigger than you, right? That keeps you here, that keeps you alive. Even if you've been diagnosed medically, right, and professionally with different things, that is real. And the healing that our people have is that we can tap into something so much bigger than us. So whether it's, knowing the moon cycles and going out and seeing things like yesterday, or celebrating the winter solstice, or going back to asking our grandmas or our moms if they're alive, or just elders in our communities, our families, like, there was a time, that we knew how to do this, right? And there's so many ways to take care of our lungs and to be dealing with COVID right now, but to find faith requires you, if you're not already doing it, to look into your own soul. And what are you practicing at home? Are you in prayer in the morning? Who are you asking for support outside of yourself that's not even here on this earth, right? Someone who's passed, or a couple of people. And so that's kind of what I bring. Are you lighting candles, right? And being in your own prayer. What are you letting go of? What powerlessness? Like, a lot of people is like, I'm at home alone, and I'm like, actually, you're not. You're never home alone. Number one, right? You have a lot of your spiritual ancestors with you, but also you have your little girl, your inner child, your adolescent, your young adult. You have a whole bunch of people around you trying to figure out COVID, right? And having an internal battle around this moment and this opportunity of healing, right? That COVID has brought into our space.
Yes. So, that's also a wonderful transition. I want to introduce now Karina Aybar Jacobs. She is a psychotherapist, and I am so excited to have her join us today. Hola, Karina.
We can't hear Karina.
Make sure that your mic is on.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Karina.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Marte. Thank you for this platform, like, much needed.
That's wonderful. Actually, we were just talking about, the different ways that, organizations and individuals are seeking help and support to go through this very, difficult emotional time. And Karina, we would love to hear from you, about your experience, with your own practice. I know you're a licensed social worker. You studied at Hunter College at the School of Social Work there, and you've been in practice for a very long time. You've been active on a variety of issues, including working with women who have survived domestic violence. I know that you've done a lot of work with organizations like the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce in terms of educating businesses on this issue. And please, tell us more about you, how you came to this work, and how has it been looking for you over the last several months.
Yes, thank you. I've had the honor of serving the community for over 14 years now. And specifically focused on around women's empowerment, but I do intervene, for example, with mother daughters, family intervention, and couples. Actually, within the last few years that I opened my own private practice, to share a little bit more about me, I was the director, and I was part of the team at the Dominican Women's Development Center. Had the honor of serving within the Nuevo Amanecer anti-domestic violence program, and so a lot of the work was on direct intervention, prevention, and even survivors leadership training. Meaning that those who had experienced abuse and were able to surpassed the trauma and felt in a better place, more empowered and ready to be of assistance to other survivors that were coming in to the program. They underwent during the leadership training an extensive training in order to accompany other clients to court, to assist them, to co-facilitate groups. And so that is some of the work. As you mentioned, more recently also training beauty professionals around domestic violence, gender equity, and intimate partner abuse, because unfortunately we have been living a pandemic within a pandemic where we have seen intimate partner abuse cases on the rise during COVID-19, since the circumstances lead to more isolation, and using the pandemic and the circumstances to further perpetrate survivors and victims and their children. And then I've also had the pressure to work at the Commission on Human Rights fighting discrimination. But after that, I realized that I thought I would do what I'm doing now as a psychotherapist and coach when I retired, but the circumstances came, and I also saw such a great need within our communities. There's such a stigma. There are lack of services and resources, lack of cultural competence. It's very different when people say, I speak Spanish, and so they serve our communities. But to understand the nuances and the barriers to access services is so crucial. And so that definitely motivated me to, to do this work that I feel so honored every day to do.
Thank you so much for that, Karina. And I have another question from one of our viewers. The question is, how do we deal with those who still think or believe that this pandemic isn't real?
Mm.
Karina, you'd like to share?
Sure. That's a tricky one, to be honest. It is understandable that people are getting mixed informations, and I think it is important to also get technical and look at the bigger picture. And I think this is it's related, I promise, even though it sounds like we're going to deviate. But when we look at, for example, Google and our means of getting information, that is actually biased, and it's based on analytics and tracking, cookies, trackers. And what do I mean by that? The moment you do a search, and let's say you're interested in, COVID-19 and how it is a conspiracy. Trust me, after that, you will get bombarded with more articles about, justifying your search, because, let's face it, the analytics, the robot that it's analyzing and what we're doing, the artificial intelligence, like within the internet, etc., it doesn't differentiate. It doesn't say like, oh no, let me introduce you to this. No, it's just feeding you what you want to be fed, right? And so I think that, during the pandemic, during elections, during so many issues, we get fed so many things. And recent research has shown that more than ever are we so divided as a country, as a nation, and even globally, because when you talk to certain people, they're like, what? It makes common sense. Like, yes, it's a conspiracy. And then other people are like, no, actually, this is what's happening, because that's what you are being fed. And there is more limited human interaction. It's not natural. Prior to this, to technology, to the pandemic, we used to interact more. It was okay to pick up a phone and call someone. Right now, I have experienced that. It's almost like so foreign when, I'm pretty old school. I pick up a phone, I call someone. It's like weird. People are so used to like texting now. And so I think that it is important to look outside, look at the different angles, and look for reliable resources, because unfortunately we have lost so many lives due to the coronavirus.
Yeah, and I think, when I do my Google research, and I'm looking at, and you see the advice that you're getting in terms of how do you maintain your mental health. One of the number one things, said to you is, well, don't spend so much time on social media. Don't spend so much time watching the news. Take a break, right? So, I think, Karina, you're right. We are being given so much information, and I think that a lot of us, and even my own family, we've become addicted, right? We've become addicted to our phones, addicted to our computers, and now that we're spending more time at home and more time isolated, we're just getting all of this information. So, how do we stave that off? How do we work, because this also, feeds into any anxieties that we may be feeling, or any depression we may be feeling. So, what other things would you recommend that people should be doing, in order to keep, their spirits up, especially during this time?
Yes, I am glad you mentioned the social media because I often I I often it often comes up with some of my clients. The anxiety levels have risen, depression because there's like being fed negative news or what's going on is overwhelming. Also like self comparison to others. It's like there are filters, etc. So it is highly recommended to take a social media detox and also limit the times that you consume the news. For example, I know that I do it once, twice maximum per day for my own, you know, boundaries and mental health in order to be a self service provider. I think it is also important to prioritize mental and emotional well-being. I think that often we talk about, I want to prioritize my physical health. I'm going to go on this diet. I'm going to exercise, and that is highly recommended. However, just like we prioritize physical health and appearance, we should prioritize mental health because trust me, it has been proven that even music, the music we consume, has an effect on our mood and our outcome. And so it is important to be mindful of the music that you're listening to, how much time you're spending on social media, and listening to the news. It is important to also reach out. And I also, one of my mantras is building women's resilience through vulnerability, but overall, just building resilience through vulnerability. What do I mean by that? I think it is important, and I heard Dr. Marte said this before, that it is important to, even if it is one person, to identify that person that you can be vulnerable with and to disclose information where you can feel safe, and not to be ashamed of your personal struggles. Quite often we underestimate the power that, owning our stories can have in order to inspire others. And also just by talking, the mere act of speaking, saying things out loud is where healing can begin. I want to share something that, for the most part, men, for instance, tend to have a high rate of addiction, alcoholism, and suicide rates. And I think that has to do with the culture that, we say, men don't cry, etc. Or like we train our men to repress their emotions. Like women are more emotional. And so that being said, I bring this up because it is important to talk, and it is okay to acknowledge emotions. They are in motion. It doesn't mean that the way it feels is the reality overall. So it's important to keep things into perspective. It's important not to blame yourself because of, you are right now unemployed and facing, a lot of challenges and anxiety in the middle of a pandemic, and in the middle of and within a system that does not facilitate the means necessary for having certain fundamental rights, such as healthcare, access to healthcare. Many people have to, decide, do I go, pay that copay, or do I pay my phone in order to communicate or get a Metro card, etc., or buy food? And so that shouldn't be the case. So it's important not to internalize the broken system that we have, unfortunately.
Thank you for that, Karina. And we have one of our viewers, Amelis Lopez. She shared, "This is true. I took an extended social media break, and it's one of the best things I've done." And I absolutely agree. I know I have a few friends that actually they just took completely out of like Facebook and Instagram, and they're like, even their productivity has gone up in terms of like they're being able to work and get certain things done and not be so, consumed with what's happening on, Facebook or Instagram, because it's just like constant information coming at us. um, another topic that I wanted us to just briefly touch on, and I know that it was an interest for some of our folks, and I may not necessarily be an area of your expertise, um, but I did want us to talk a little bit about children and how they're experiencing the pandemic, and how can parents and adults kind of help them also manage and deal with their own feelings around what's happening with the pandemic. So some kids have experienced things like, even things like bullying, right? Because they're doing all this work on their computers, they're on social media, there is cyberbullying that happens, and sometimes you don't become aware of this thing happening until maybe it's a little too late. And so what kind of things should parents be looking for, and what kind of services do you think parents could access for their kids?
Go for it, Karina. Go for it.
Dr. Marte, you want to respond?
No, I'm gonna let Karina respond. I'll say something after Karina.
Okay.
Yes, and to disclose that children, they're not my area of expertise. However, I do have many clients. I'm a mother myself, um, that disclose their challenges, especially during the pandemic. And I think that some of the signs to look for is isolation. Okay, it is important to be mindful of that. The body language. Sometimes, unfortunately, without intending to, we can invalidate our children. It's like, mommy, I'm feeling cold. You're not cold. You have this sweater on and all that. Or like, mommy, I don't like this. I don't like this in particular. It's like, well, how can you not like it? You're being ungrateful. And it's like, it's important to take a step back and listen and remember that we were children also. So it is important to dedicate the time to seek to understand first and then to be understood. I think that culturally speaking, we have the tendency, and it's like we take for granted the fact that children are their own person and their own being. And so it is important to recognize that children are not an extension of yourself, but rather you raise children for society. And I think that quite often we forget that and try to impose or think about, like, you have to do as I say, or we think that we deserve somehow for children to disclose to us what they're going through, but we're asking, like, what's going on, but talk. And it's like we have to be tactful. I think it's important to check in often while giving space, you know listen, as I said, listen intently, ask open-ended questions, oh, how, what's going on. It looks like, lately you've been looking a little bit down. You want to talk about it. Just provide the space and to say it is okay to have emotions. They may not disclose at the moment, but stressing the fact that you're there no matter what, and to listen, and to rather that, even if it's a difficult conversation, to talk about cyberbullying. It's important to watch out for body language, such as, like, the fidgeting, the pulling hairs, biting your nails, those are telltale of anxiety, and we as adults do that. And so it's important to be on the lookout for that and gently, you know, bring it up when the time is right, and also hold the space for those conversations to be had, and even be vulnerable yourself without oversharing.
Okay, and Dr. Marte, what would you like to share with us?
I think, I'm a mom as well, and I have a beautiful 2-year-old grandson running around this place. And I think we're talking about a couple of things when it comes to children, right? I think my biggest thing is, first of all, you can't take your child somewhere you haven't been. So this is a great opportunity for mothers, parents, community, whoever is the guardian, to do your own healing. Children come into our lives so that we can do our own healing and we can parent ourselves again. It's really never about parenting them. It's about us parenting ourselves. And so I'm saying to people that I'm coaching, well, bring your child into this coaching, right? If you're doing spirituality, bring your child into spirituality. If whatever you need, your child needs, and whatever your child needs, you need. And so if your child is throwing a tantrum, throw your tantrum with them. If your child is in laughter and play, maybe you should stop and be in laughter and play. We are a reflection of each other, and this is a great opportunity. Like we say, mental health is a big taboo for us in our communities, and there's nowhere to go actually right now. We are each other's mental health therapists, right? Partly because, not because there's not mental health people available, but because most of us can't come outside and access it the way that we can, and most of our communities are not actually on social media or even have computers, right? So I think when COVID first hit, I was thinking about, the children at the detention center and community people who, will never be in this conversation, right? I think we had that question posed, how do we deal with people that don't think COVID is real? Well, there's people who, don't have access to any information about anything because they're street vendors, because they're immigrants, because they don't have access, because they don't have papers, because so many things, right? And so, the way that this pandemic was set up is that it's made us think that this is our fault, that if we don't wear the mask, we're doing something wrong, that if we don't wash our hands, we're doing something wrong. And that's how capitalism works. It makes us always think that we are not enough, that we are not doing enough. And so then we bring that home to our children. Then you're not enough. You're not doing enough, right? And I have to, battle all of this shit. And so, tú lo que tienes que estar en la computadora. I gotta go do all of this, right? What the fuck? So, we gotta check in, like I started off saying, we've never done COVID before. We've never done quarantine. We've done a lot of things before, but we've never done this one before. So también bringing some love to a real stressful situation. And I know I have a family member who has a teenager at home, and I'm like, listen, this is the best time. Olvídate, forget it. He don't gotta go to school. Like, think of something else, because there's, they're stressed. They're stressed, and so give them a break. We all need a break. Take a break.
Agreed. And I absolutely, I love the NAP ministry, which is on Instagram, and they're all about, encouraging people to rest, to take a break, to take a nap, because that's important for us and to be able to function on a day to day. And that also does impact our moods and our feelings and how important it is to rest. I wanted to make sure that I shared, with our viewers a few resources, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about, resources that you recommend for people to reach, whether it's free to, private therapy. One is New York Project Hope Emotional Support Helpline, and that phone number is 1-844 863-9314. Again, it's the New York Project Hope Emotional Support Helpline. And you can call there if you're feeling that you need any mental health assistance. Also, New York City has a website, is nycwell.cityofnewyork.us. And you can go and access information for mental health services there as well. And we'll make sure to have that information available on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network Facebook page and on our YouTube page as well. I'll turn it over right now to Karina, and then we have a few more minutes, and to Dr. Marte, if you'd like to share any resources with our audience.
Sure. I also want to stress, the National Alliance on Mental Illness is a great resource as well, because it has a compilation of different resources. They have a project, it's called Compartiendo Esperanza, and it's a 90-minute program to increase mental health awareness. And I think that it's very important, especially within our communities, to understand, because unfortunately, I don't know if this was touched upon, but sometimes like our communities refer to like pain, even when they see a provider, as like, oh, me duele el corazón, so it's important to be aware of, the colloquialism, some of the expressions. So what does that mean? So to be able to have that, mental health training and, capacity building. I also shared a few resources that I believe you're going to provide for the audience, but Therapy for Latinx, it's a database also that offers like different resources and other therapists, Psychology Today, Teladoc, and now especially online, you can do telehealth. And I believe you do have the number where you can text and talk. You mentioned NYC Well. I do want to stress, though, especially for those who are not ready, are not certain about like joining therapy because of the stigma that there is, or no estoy loca o loco, that it is important to, again, I cannot stress enough, to find someone that you can trust, or the least you can do, at least write it down on a planner, on a journal, on a notebook, how you feel, where do I feel it in my body? Many times we repress emotions, and it's quite somatic. We think like, oh my goodness, I'm getting all these headaches, and it has to do with repressed emotions and not, being able to share what you are going through. So it is okay to ask for help. It's okay to seek support. Just want to stress that.
Thank you so much, Karina, for that. Dr. Mante.
I think I want to, instead of giving all those amazing resources that you all already did, there is a national, let me see if I find the name. It's called the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color, which is really important. I also founded the World Healing Lab. So if you're an organization, an institution that is looking for consultants to come in and do some support around mental health in your own organization or helping your staff, they are your most important resource outside of funding. So take care of yourselves. And I think what I want to, there's also on Facebook a Healing Justice Consortium page where organizations and healers and consultants share information back and forth about resources. Your local nonprofit organizations that have always stood in the gap are also really important to touch base. And I think I want to leave everybody just letting people know that we see you. We love you. If nobody has told you yet, we are sorry for what is happening on this earth right now. It is not your fault. None of us deserve this, right? You are not to blame whether you wear a mask or not. And, and we love you, right? Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And I want to, thank all of you for taking the time out to watch today's program. Thank you so much to Dr. Dayanara Marte and to Karina Aybar Jacobs for joining us today and sharing with us such wonderful information around mental health and self-care. I want to encourage everyone to please, take a moment, especially on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day in the Latino community. Enjoy the people who you live with in your home. Zoom with your family members that you can't see. And take a little time to rest if you can. I want to thank the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, our executive producer, Zenaida Mendez, Freddie Pinto, our supervising producer, and all of the people who really helped to make this happen today. I especially want to thank my family, my mother and my father for helping me with my daughter, Carmen, to be able to bring this to you today. So happy holidays. Happy New Year, and we look forward to seeing you in 2021. And thank you so much for your time and for all that you do for us. Thank you.